Well, hello and welcome everyone on the great wide interwebs, particularly our Awesome Con and Rose City Comic Con fans. Hi, everyone. My name is Gitau, and I am president of Geeks Out, a nonprofit focusing on queer fandom, and also committee member for FlameCon, which we'll talk about that in a bit. But I'm joined here today by three of my favorite superhumans, as Jay said the other day. And today we're going to talk about finding pride in the dark. And we are celebrating pride and queer identity and creativity, even though we might be in quarantine. So I know, but we're here together, so it's not that sad. With that said, I'm going to do some brief introductions, kind of give a warm up to our room here, and then we'll dive into our topic. So, you all can't see what order I have on my screen, so I will just tap people as we go along. I'm going to start with Jay Justice. Jay is a cosplayer extraordinaire, editor and advocate. Her work has been featured by Sci-Fi, BBC America, Marvel Comics, and has been the inspiration for new characters in DC Comics and Boom Studios. Absolutely wonderful. I'm so excited to have her here. As part of her work, she's created over 100 different costumes, and is absolutely a vocal advocate for POC, LGBTQ, and disability representation in our community. So Jay, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I love it. I'm happy to do what I do. And it's funny because a lot of times people with like cis and white and able-bodied and straight privilege will say about a character that is Black, female, queer, and disabled, that's too many things. One person can't be all those things. And I'm like, well, I do my best.
Yeah. You were all things to us and more. So thank you. Next on our panel for Finding Pride in the Dark, we have Fyodor Pavlov. Fyodor is a Russian immigrant and longtime New Yorker, and a queer trans artist creating work that focuses on motifs in history, which as an art historian, librarian, totally my jam. Fyodor's work in print can be found in The Other Side, an anthology of queer paranormal romance, Dates, an anthology of queer historic fiction, and mine, on my bookshelf back here, a celebration of liberty and freedom that was benefiting Planned Parenthood. His most recent project is a fully illustrated and hand-painted tarot deck, and if you were not watching that Kickstarter blow through the roof, oh my goodness. We've got plenty to fill you in on, but Fyodor, hi, welcome, how are you?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm super stoked to be here on like the virtual kind of FlameCon situation, because I was super bummed that the con was postponed, so I'm very excited to like see some of my favorite people and participate in this conversation with you guys.
Yeah, I mean, even in this conversation, it's like if we were lined up at a panel, you'd just be sitting right over here and I could say, awesome. And finally, last but not least, we have Raffi Regulus. Raffy is the co-founder and president of NYC Gamers, a nonprofit whose mission is to uplift the narratives and experiences of LGBTQIA+ gamers and folks in our community. Raffy also works as a senior client advocacy specialist with the New York City Anti-Violence Project, which is one of my favorite charities, and I hope we definitely have a moment to highlight the work that you're doing. In addition to working with New York City Gamers and Anti-Violence Project, Raffy is also facilitating a weekly LGBTQ youth group in the Bronx. So you've got plenty on your plate, but thank you for making the time to hang out with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really feeling the energy already, and I'm so excited because had it not been for Miss Rona, I would probably be in DC sharing like fun with y'all right now. But maybe next year.
I have to say, yeah, this is about the time in the past that we definitely would have seen each other at Awesome Con. But I'm looking forward because Awesome Con, Geeks Out will be presenting another year of Pride Alley with Awesome Con. And that is definitely a space where we get to gather and you know, kiki and talk about, you know, all of our favorite subjects in queer fandom and gaming. I'm not much of a gamer myself, but I hope you fill me in as we continue this conversation.
It is never too late to find the light of the holy gaming. We will bring you there, girl. We'll bring you there.
Okay, all right. You know, honestly, when video games got more than 6 buttons on the controller, I was like, I'm out. It's just too much.
The trick is not to count the buttons. It's all right.
Well, then I'm just like,
it's like genders. There can be as many as you need. It's fine.
Too much button pushing.
Interesting, because my gender has drift.
No, I don't know gaming, but I'm here for puns, so thank you. I also want to give a quick shout out for those of you who are watching on Facebook Live. If you have questions for our group that is assembled here today, as we talk about pride and working through extraordinary circumstances, please feel free to share your questions and comments with us, and we will do some Q&A when we get through. We'll check in with you guys. So, first question, I'm going to stop talking. Nobody wants to hear me talk anymore. I want to talk about all of you. So I'm going to try and keep this regular because, again, it's difficult to make eye contact because we're not sitting at a big table on a podium. But Jay, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work, and specifically, who are you centering in your work? Who are you doing it for? You know, why your work is important to you?
I center people who are marginalized in every aspect, whether it's people with disabilities or whether it's people who are trans, people of color, women especially. I want people to feel like the default human experience is not cis, straight, white, and able-bodied. Like or even if it's Christian, I want people to understand that a superhero doesn't necessarily have to be Christian. If you can have a religious hero that believes in a different God than the one that you think is the default, and it doesn't make them any less valid, and it doesn't make their story any less interesting. In fact, it makes it more interesting because we've gotten to hear so few of those stories. And sometimes people want to create a story that features something different, but they themselves are privileged and don't have that perspective. So a lot of what I do as sensitivity reader and as an editor is to say, okay, why don't you bring in someone from that background that you're trying to put a spotlight on, rather than you Columbusing it, or missionarying it, like why don't you allow them to tell their own story, or at the very least collaborate with someone? Because it might be that someone with privilege has the access, but someone with the actual, like, I don't want to say talent, because I mean, everyone has talent in different ways, but someone with the talent and the lived experience and the story to tell doesn't have the access that the privileged person without that knowledge has. And so I feel like if you have already been given so many opportunities, you owe it to everyone else to bring another seat to the table so you're not just by yourself. Like, and that's how I feel about everything I do, whether it's literary work or comic book work or gaming work. There's so many people out there with something to tell and something to share. And it's not fair that we live in such an imperialist society that people have just been pushed down for so long. And I just want everyone to have a chance to tell their story. So I really love finding people who have been doing the work for years and don't have the recognition and helping them get it. That makes me really happy.
Well, that's wonderful to hear you say. And I have to say, I always appreciate how vocal you are. I'm despite the fact that, I don't know, I talk with people and I'm on panels and stuff. I think naturally I'm a person who just sort of, I like to observe. I'm sort of like hanging out in the background watching, but I really appreciate how you put yourself forward. You're talking to people and you are raising these issues publicly. So thank you for your work. And Fyodor, I'm going to turn to you and ask you the same. Tell me about your work and who are you centering and why is that important to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the queer and specifically the trans experience is very important in my work. What I bring into like the people and the kind of vision of humanity that I want to center in my work is just a variety. As Jay said, there is a lot of focus placed on a very heteronormative, very white, very cis sort of, I wouldn't say a majority because that's not the majority of people, but sort of the imperialist view of society, which complicates and colors a lot of stuff and a lot of art, a lot of illustration, because that is a very visual medium and frequently it is not accompanied by words. And so what you say has to be said in your art, which is kind of why I don't really like to talk about my art because I rely fully on my viewer to take something away from it. I put something on paper, but then it's out of my hands, because my viewer is going to bring their experience, their view, their opinions on what they're looking at. So my job as a creator is to put on the paper the vision that I want, what I want them to see, and also for them to extrapolate something that makes them joyful, something that reflects them, something that makes them see themselves in what it is that I'm making, because that's the point of human contact for me. I, as a person, made something that somebody else saw themselves reflected in. There is nothing better for me as far as art is concerned. And that is kind of the energy that I try to bring in, specifically in creating my tarot deck most recently, because the occult world and the world of tarot is absolutely not immune to the same marginalization that we see in the wider world. And it is definitely reflected in the visuals that have been created in the tarot. But the important thing to remember is also the history of it, where it's like the most famous tarot images that we have, the Pamela Coleman Smith images present in the Rider-Waite tarot, were made by, as far as we know, queer woman of color.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Pamela Coleman Smith is the illustrator, and specifically, so she worked with Rider and Waite, Andrew Waite, and some writer guy who gives a shit who he was. He's not important because he did not contribute half as much work to the deck that we all know and love as this woman who illustrated the cards. And so carrying on that legacy as a white person, but somebody who is not cisgender or heterosexual, I was like, what can I bring to this already incredible work? How can I expand? And how can I center people who are not just like me in what it is that I'm doing? So
yeah, I have to say, one of the things I really love about your illustration is that you are putting people who have relationships and bodies that we haven't seen in a historical context. So, and I definitely, and I love that you said, I find it really interesting that you're like, I don't really like to talk about my work because I want people to like bring their perspective to it, but it's just like, oh, it just jumps off the page, and it's very amazing work. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that on and offline, obviously. Raffy, you have had, despite all the changes this year, you've had a big year with the work that you're doing, and I'd love for you to tell us a bit about that.
I mean, where do I begin, right? I think it's important to just acknowledge first and foremost, the space that I'm in, right? Like, I wouldn't be where I am today were it not for extraordinary Black and brown queer folks who are a part of this like intersection of the gaming community and social justice work that kind of like saw me already where I was at in my life's work and my passion, and said, these are places where we can support you in getting lifted, right? Like in becoming more visible, right? And I remember being in a place where I was like, all right, I can do that. I'm going to build the confidence and the resilience that I need to get there. I appreciate the support. Also, how can I make sure that my community is getting there with me? Because I don't believe in like, what's the point of like baking the pie if I don't have folks to share it with, right? So I think that it took a long time. There was a lot of ups and downs. There were a lot of challenges. And I'm so proud to say that I'm in a place in my life where I can proudly say that before the age of 30, being born and raised in the Bronx, within my Blackness, my queerness, my non-binariness, my Puerto Ricanness, right? I am the co-founder of a nonprofit organization, right? With a legendary mission. Like,
Tell
I'm
us
so
more.
excited. So NYC Gamers, our mission is to uplift the narratives and experiences of LGBTQIA plus gamers and folks throughout the gaming community. And the reason why we express it in that way is to acknowledge that if we're going to move forward as a community, we have to make sure that even the most marginalized folks throughout the matrix of oppression are getting there with us, right? And we're not going to take it to the next step until we're sure that everyone is there with us. So I love attending, like being a part of these panels, going to the conventions, speaking to other stakeholders throughout our community, because I think it's important for us to be able to skill share and to find collaborative work in order for us to base build and make sure that we are, I guess, becoming less desensitized by what feels a lot like academia language around our identities, and maybe like heavily profitized work around like I think a lot about like capitalism, and there's no ethical form of consumption under capitalism, right? So it's like, how do we decenter all of that from our narratives? How do we reclaim ourselves? And I honestly believe, in summary, that gaming is a great place to do that. Whether you're a game developer, whether you're someone on the way to work playing Candy Crush, whether you're someone who is a part of a gaming group, it be at a convention or on Facebook, like, you belong. And that's why NYC Gamers believes that the Y in gamers means you belong.
I love that. That's wonderful, and I know, touching. And now I'm really resenting or regarding the fact that I said I don't game. So you've converted me. But that actually.
I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to give a quick shout out though to Jay, because Jay, I was on a panel yesterday with Lincoln Center's first Pride panel, representing the Anti-Violence Project, and I name dropped Jay Justice, Tanya from I Need Diverse Games, and a couple of other folks for being the ones who made me feel visible and made me feel comfortable in these spaces. So I just wanted to honor that and thank you.
That's just I have no words. That's wonderful. But actually, you know, it sort of so touching. But it I think that's actually a good point in the conversation to talk about who are the folks, who are the people that you consider to be in your community, and particularly now, you know, that we're in New York, at least we're going on month 4 or 5, I don't know, time is relevant, of, you know, not having the physical contact or like being able to occupy the same space. So I'm curious to hear about, you know, who's in your community, and how are you staying connected with them now? Because community and identity is so important to all the work that you're doing. Raffy, could you kind of tackle that a little bit?
So when I think about like who are stakeholders in my community, I guess.
Yeah.
Question, right?
Yeah, and yeah, who are you serving? And if you can't see them out in the real world, how are you still staying connected with them and still feel like you're fulfilling your organization's mission, let's say?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I always censor youth within these types of conversations because I feel like they're constantly being left out of the conversation for several reasons. I'm also thinking about folks who are also navigating this work. So like, okay, so let's be transparent, right? The moment that COVID started happening, NYC Gamers had a board meeting and we said, all right, who are our stakeholder organizations? Who are our partner organizations who have been doing this longer than us? Because we need to chat with them and say, what are y'all doing? So that we make sure that number one, we're not reinventing the wheel. And number two, we're not assuming ourselves high and mighty or thinking that we're like these pioneers doing the work, right? So we reached out to Gitau, we reached out to Jay Justice, we reached out to like FlameCon folks and Gamer X and I Need Diverse Games. We checked in with the folks that have already been working with us pre-COVID and said, how are you? Because first and foremost, we have to reclaim our humanity in that narrative, right? And secondly, like, what are y'all going to be doing and how can we support one another with that? So, you know, acknowledging that it's been what, 3-4 months in a space where it feels like time is no longer relevant nor does it exist, I think that we've been able to identify the folks that are in, I guess, more of a need of visibility now more than ever. So we're thinking about folks who don't have accessibility to a stable, let's say, Wi-Fi or like virtual spaces, folks who need those safer spaces online more than ever. We had to look at our group agreements and say, all right, how can we uplift this to make sure that folks are feeling like they can claim safety within our safe spaces? How are we going to uplift the language that we're using throughout social media to make sure that it's more accessible? And we're not perfect, right? We still have need to grow both socially and economically so that we can build those tools to figure out, hey, how much is it going to cost for us to get this translated so that it's multilingual messaging? How are we going to get this accessible to folks with access needs who maybe don't have the accessibility to be able to read something on a screen or to hear us when we're having these panels, right? I'm currently doing a webinar, I think this weekend, if not next, I'm going to be participating in a webinar where I'm going to learn how to type image description because I need to do better. So I think that these are some ways that I'm identifying folks that are a part of our community, but that definitely need more of that visibility and that uplifting.
Yeah. And I love how you say that, one of your motivations is, to be honest, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. I know that we've done very similar things, and that's been my focus on the FlameCon side of things. So I do Geeks Out work, and I do, throughout the year FlameCon with a large team of many other volunteers. But one of the things that I found is it's so important to check in with your community. I think often, well, I'll say from personal experience, as like a nerdy kid growing up, I sort of had this like overachiever, like I have to be perfect and I have to prove myself, and I have to do that by doing it all by myself. And so that can lead to sort of it's being antisocial. And it doesn't really benefit anyone, right? I burn out, I'm not able to serve the community. And one of the things that I've definitely taken this time in quarantine to do, to the best of my intention is, try to reach out to people and also have the conversations about like, if you could do X, Y, Z perfectly, what would you do? Or what have you done to solve this kind of problem in the past? Certainly on the organizing side, keeping that in mind that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and that, we're all in a community striving to, we're all here for representation and to make our voices heard. Let's help each other out. And everyone's been really open, and I really love that about our community. But Jay, I'm curious to hear from you. In addition to who's in your community, how have you been staying in touch with people during this time?
Well, it's been hard. So my girlfriend lives in Portland, and we're gonna miss our anniversary for the first time this year because I can't go there and she can't come here. So that sucks. But video calls and phone calls and texting and constant chat with everybody who works with. Oh, I forgot to mention earlier, I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of LGBTHQ. So we do a lot of queer programming for conventions and a lot of different things like that. And so we've just been talking about everything and trying to keep up with which convention we were supposed to be at that is now pushed forward, and how are we going to do vending there, and like all kinds of stuff. And I think we kind of have to start every conversation with, what's your mental capacity for work right now? Like, are you okay? Is someone in your family sick? Are you isolating because you came in contact with someone? Like, I think checking in with everybody mentally before you start the work is really important, because you don't want to accidentally overwhelm someone and cause them to have to go through more trauma than they're already experiencing, because the weight of feeling responsible for your community while you are also enduring trauma is really, really difficult. And you don't want to let everything drop because you weren't taking care of yourself and you weren't taking care of other people, or at least enabling them, giving them the space to take care of themselves before you ask something of them. And a lot of it has been like turning down work that is too mentally traumatic to do when you are a Black person living in a city where someone was just lynched in the park near your house. Yeah. A lot of my work is racially involved. It's very difficult to edit something about racial violence when you are terrified that you're going to experience it because you were Black at the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah. And it's been really difficult in terms of like being afraid that you're going to get sick and also dealing with everything else. And then, I don't even know if I have the capacity to get into half of the stuff, but long story short, check in as much as you can. Try to keep your mental space as healthy as you can, because you can't help someone else if you're not in a good position. You got to put on your own life jacket before you put on the person next to you.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so important. And one of those things that I didn't figure out after years of, my mom telling me that, and like one day it finally clicked. Fyodor, I'm sort of interested in, I'd love for you to talk about how your creative process has changed during this time. When I think about art, I think of it as being, potentially like a solitary task, something you can kind of go into your own little world and create. But I'm wondering if you've seen changes in yourself in these last few months.
Yes and no.
Mm.
So actually, I was one of those people who, like early on during lockdown, I had my lockdown and lockdown where, so before I got into the tattoo industry, I actually was a freelance artist. So for 3 years, I was just working from home all the time. So I had my routine. I'm very much like a schedule person where I'm like, I'm going to get up at around 8 o'clock and I'm going to have my breakfast and then I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start working. And, and then I don't get up for like a few hours. So I kind of had that routine. Now it's been a couple of years, but I sort of had it and I fell back really easily into it because, my studio space is all set up already. And my partner and I, we work pretty well together from homes. We're kind of used to each other's rhythms and everything. So with that in mind, like not really, I was kind of like almost business as usual when all of this has started.
Yeah.
As things progressed, I wouldn't say I burnt out, but I'm definitely in the same boat as you, where I'm just like, I'm going to do everything by myself. I'm doing fine. I'm great. I'm on track. I'm getting shit done, like fantastic. But of course that gets really exhausting. And about a month in, you kind of realize like I'm fraying at the edges and I need to kind of refocus and regroup. And in addition to everything, I definitely felt the pressure. Like my Kickstarter had literally just wrapped the weekend that lockdown happened in NYC. So It gave me something to focus on where I was like, all right, well, I can do all of my art. Tattoo shops are closed, so I'm unemployed indefinitely, but I can still fall back on my freelance. But I have this big thing that I'm delivering to a lot of people that really matters a lot to them. And it's a small thing. It's a tarot deck. It's not fucking life-saving, but it's something that people are looking forward to. And it's something that meant a lot to a lot of people. And so it gave me this focus of like, I just need to like put my head down and keep working on this thing. And the big learning process, as you said, like, sorry, this is going to sound like a humble brag, but the Kickstarter definitely got bigger than I thought it was ever gonna.
Oh, don't humble brag. brag. You broke 6 figures. What can you give me these stats again? Yes. So your initial ask for the tarot deck, which is the most gorgeous art. What was your initial ask?
18 grand.
Okay. Very reasonable. We kickstarted FlameCon with 14 and I wish we had asked for more, but that's a reasonable Kickstarter number. What number did you end with?
113 grand.
Yes. That is honestly like that. I think that speaks to kind of talk about like your creative process. I definitely want to give voice to the fact that you've been producing amazing work, but also networking and being a part of this community. And I definitely see like that response to your Kickstarter was definitely a reflection of the fact that like we're all here, we all love your art, and you've been working hard to like get it out there. So absolutely congrats. Brag, not humble.
And I want to say one thing. You think that your art is not life-saving? It is. I absolutely guarantee you that there is a queer baby who is crying with joy that they're going to get your tarot deck. And it's like, it's something they're looking forward to, and it's going to really make them happy and give them joy. And joy is so hard to come by right now. So don't ever think your art's not life-saving.
Thank you. And with that, like there is the responsibility where I feel like I made this thing and I put it out there. And I want it, like one of the big things is I want this deck to be accessible to people, which is why I try to keep the costs low and I try to look at all the ways where I can distribute it, where it's been online and that people could look at it. And it's something like, obviously I need to make money because I'm an independent creator and I need to like make a way for myself to put this thing out there and also put food on my table. But it felt like work where, the responsibility of fulfilling that promise and everything that it means, because like the way that it got big was because the Lover's Tarot, specifically that card, blew up. And it wasn't the only thing that I wanted to say with my deck, but it kept growing bigger and bigger. And so I want to give the return on the promise that I made. But this is also a big education in asking for help, because I realized that it's like, I painted 78 pieces of art and now I need to like figure out how to like make it a physical thing everybody can hold. And that has been like, even though I've been sort of in my room, in my enclosed space, being an introvert, that reach and that support that I was given for the work that I was making really gave me a strong focus in my work during the last 4 months to like give it back.
Yeah, I think it's also great that you highlighted asking for help, because I think if there's a theme in in our conversation about finding pride in the dark and finding community, asking for help is that thing that like is hard sometimes, but definitely necessary.
Where people are very used to having to be independent.
You know, that's actually a really good read on that. I don't think I'd made that connection before, but yeah, I definitely, when you're often in a place of like having to be the only one of you, or yeah, that definitely resonates. Either Jay or Raffy, have you noticed your working habits changing? Jay, that sounds like a knowing chuckle.
Oh God. Okay, so before this, I averaged 20-25 conventions a year, and I live out of a suitcase, and I'm never home. I'm the best roommate ever. I pay the rent early, and I'm never home. And
wait, that's 25 conventions a year? Oh my gosh! Wow. Oof. I did 6 last year, and I was like, that's it.
My work habits have drastically changed.
Yeah.
I had to go just from this is what I do to, okay, we're going to step up all of the online work, all of the streaming work, all of the editing work, because I do editing too, but it's like that's something that you can do in a hotel room. But if you aren't going to a convention, you kind of have to figure out, all right, how am I going to pay this rent? Because I can't really rely on being able to go to the post office to sell things, because you know where you can get the post office? Rona. So I don't do shipping anymore. I could probably look into drop shipping, but I feel like I want to focus more on work that can be done remotely. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And it's been a tough transition, because a lot of the on-camera work relies on you being present and not dealing with trauma. And so you kind of have to figure out how to get your mental state in a way that you can be on camera and that you can be reliable and you can be relatable without sobbing into it like a real world privacy room camera.
Oh yeah. Like honestly, real talk, a couple weeks ago, weeks.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, right. But the first week that we were learning about George Floyd, and people were it was kind of kicking up more videos online. I accidentally, because I have settings on my social media that I don't want videos to autoplay, which is a lesson I learned back in 2014. But I accidentally ended up seeing something that was incredibly difficult to watch. And I just I slacked my boss and was like, I'm not feeling well. And I took a half day, which was that took a lot for me to be that was a kind of self-care that I don't think I would have afforded myself if I hadn't had the time by myself during quarantine to realize well, what's important? How do I keep myself going? Raffy, do you have you were honestly listening to you speak is sometimes like going to church. You have so much wisdom, and can you share some wisdom on self-care? Because I feel like you've got this wisdom.
So first I want to honor the fact that I guess the way I speak and my philosophies, they were all heavily influenced by the Black trans women that raised me and saved me. So I just want to put that in the space, right? Also, I mean, look, let's put it this way, right? I am a very social person. I am a Leo, double Leo, Libra moon, right? So bam. I was not doing well in quarantine. I was not, and social media was a minimal but effective form of self-care and sustainability for me, because I was able to reach out to folks and feel like I had that connection. I also played a lot of games like Overwatch and Animal Crossing, right? Because I needed that social interaction. But when everything blew up with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything, I felt like there was this thing that switched on that I had been missing in my life for so long. And I was I was like, yo, that's it. I need to hit the streets, right? And I went to the protests, and I was there on the front lines, and it was horrifying, but I also had to think about my own self-care and sustainability. And I had to think about my family and my team and my community. So as soon as I got there, I was like, gotta head back. I want to go the next day. Can't do it. My back hurts. I live with physical disabilities, right? I can't always be there. And then they said, we're going to have a march at Stonewall. And I said, okay, fuck it. Let's take a Tylenol and go to Stonewall. So I go to Stonewall. By the time I was done with it, I was like, all right, I need someone to get me out of New York, or I'm going to have a breakdown. Like I'm literally gonna have to go to the hospital because I know my mental health. I know that my physical, like my body is telling me that this is too much. I am burning out. So I spoke to my job, my day job, like AVP, and they were like, take time, take time. I spoke to my team at NYC Gamers. They were like, we have a pride event coming up. We got this. You take the time you need. And NYC Gamers did that. Geeks Out, we had the School Pride Festival. Geeks Out was our partners in outreach. We had over 100 participants. I was able to not only take much needed time away from everything to like focus on my rejuvenation, my spiritual like replenishment, my self-care and sustainability, but I was able to do it in a way where I was able to witness that these platforms throughout my life that I feel heavily rely on my presence were able to keep moving forward and do amazing work, knowing that I wasn't going to be at my 100% to be there. And I think that that's kind of like the culmination of what I can share with folks when it comes to self-care and sustainability. It's okay to not be okay. Wow, loud and rude. I'm sorry if y'all heard that outside. But like, that's how true it is. You know, like, I believe that every moment that you are a Black, trans, queer, you know, LGBTQIA plus Black, brown person of color, and you wake up, that's an act of revolution and resilience. And the moment that you wake up and say, I am not okay, and that is okay, and you share that with your community, it is your community's responsibility, especially aspiring allies, to be able to step up and not just say, oh, we hear you, we see you, how can we support you? But offer options in ways that they can support you. You know, is it something economic? Right? Venmo, Cash App me, etc. Right? Is it something more like virtual support, right? Like my DM is open for you when you're ready, right? Like find ways to be able to build those bridges in ways that are both consensual and intentional and have an impact on not only self-care, but community care.
That is, again, like going to church. I should have been taking notes.
It's okay, it's on video.
Yeah. I'm gonna suggest just a bunch of us close our mics if we're not actively talking, because it seems like we have a little feedback on the line.
I just want to answer a question someone had asked.
Yeah,
and it's ties in a little bit to what Reverend Raffy was saying a minute ago, so it works. They had asked me to elaborate more on what LGBTHQ is. So LGBTHQ is a company that I started with Matthew Levine and Tony Ray. We met, I've known Tony forever, Tony's my boy, but Matthew, we met at the first FlameCon, and he did not know what he was doing in terms of like having a table. None
of us knew what we were doing, even us.
No. FlameCon #1 was a hot mess. Literally, someone passed out in the panel room.
I remember that.
No air conditioning, Brooklyn, August.
You learn, you ask questions.
Yes. But
anywho,
the
space was so pretty.
It was a beautiful death trap. I got stuck in the elevator twice. But yeah, we talked about it over dinner. We were like, we want to make something that's kind of like the experience you have at FlameCon, but at other conventions where there isn't a Pride Alley or there isn't a diversity lounge. We want LGBTHQ to be a place where people can meet and talk about queer comic books, where queer comic book creators can come and we can give them a space to sell their books. We can kind of like make a platform for other people in our community to feel welcome. And we started it and it's gotten bigger and bigger, and we've just been bringing it to conventions all up and down the East Coast. It's been really, really great to see people who started out just selling a couple of stickers at our table and now they're self-publishing. People who didn't really know if their video game was good enough, and I'm like, no, it is good enough. I'm gonna bring you to PAX and you're gonna sell your game, and they're doing great. They have their own table now. So it's been really fun to kind of like bring people into the community and make them feel welcome. And also, I love that a lot of times there'll be a trans cosplayer's first convention and they'll be like, someone told me to come here and I would be safe here. And I'm like, yes, you are safe here with your family now. Like, it's been really great. And I appreciate everyone who supported LGBTQ over the years. We've gotten tons of donations from other companies to try to help us grow and get bigger so that we can help more people. And I love working with them. And I'm definitely going to share all their socials on this post later so you guys can join us. And if you are interested in volunteering, let us know. We're looking for graphic designers because we want to make more awesome Pride stuff. And Matthew is our co-director and co-founder, and he cannot do everything and graphic design. So please, if you graphic design, come help us because he's tired and he's a full-time job.
Yeah, I find one of another personal a virtue, which I might ask you guys for later. Knowing my limitations, can't do it all. Got to pick what you can do.
Yeah.
But Jay, you started talking about conventions, and I was imagining your table when you were talking about LGBTHQ. And so my question for the group, we've had a lot of change this year. Pretty much the entire convention slate for 2020 has been canceled, with maybe a few things that are tentative for the end of this year. We've gone a long time without a convention, y'all, and I'm wondering, what are you looking forward to when our con season returns? And specifically, mostly because I'm being a little selfish as a convention organizer, I'd love to hear if there are any like changes that you've had time to think about in this break from conventions, or ways that we've adapted to this new world that you would like to see incorporated in conventions.
Let me unfurl my list.
Okay, so let's start with let's do highlights. Fyodor, because usually when I see you, you're behind a table. And what are you most looking forward to when we hit convention season again?
So I do not have nearly as a complicated and busy a schedule as I think y'all do, because I'm such a recluse. I'm like in my studio doing my art. FlameCon, there's been many years where FlameCon has been like it for me. That is the convention that I'm going to.
Really?
Kind of, yeah, because I kind of stick to the East Coast.
Oh, okay.
And it's picked up a little bit more over the years. Like Blue Stockings did a comics week last week that I was participating in.
Oh, nice.
But overall, like FlameCon is like my big con. So it's the thing that I look forward to every year, because again, like I said, being an introvert sitting in my room is all well and good, but actually connecting to and meeting the people who like my work, who are fucking amazing creators themselves, like seeing all y'all at the convention, like that's my like fucking Christmas time in August. So I was really, really upset that it's not happening this year, but of course, better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
But like, so just looking forward to, literally just doing it again, being able to folks,
setting the bar
to come back stronger, more powerful, breathing fire with very long hair next year.
Gorgeous hair, which you've received compliments for in chat for your gorgeous hair.
Thank you. It's ridiculous. Thank you.
Look,
hopefully by August, by my big change, it's going to be down. I'll just be cousin it. You'll find that's how you'll know me behind the table.
Maybe your witchy powers might be in your hair, and so summon the storms.
As for changes, honestly, like I think the big consideration is accessibility for everybody. I think, aside from physical accessibility in terms of like ramps and elevators and stuff for the visually impaired folks, there is also a lot, again, like us queers, a lot of us grapple with mental illness, which manifests in very different ways that can make socializing and being in a big community scary and nerve-wracking. And I see it a lot meeting people at the table. Like it took a long time for me to sort of get over my anxiety and like social whatever, is to be like present and to meet with people who want to see me as well as my work. And like I have a tendency to kind of hide behind my table, but part of the joy of being at a convention is to be able to connect people across that table. And so I think just like keeping space, physical space in mind, I think is going to be very important for physical and mental health for everybody concerned, especially coming out of this with probably a whole slew of new like nervous energy about being outside, about being around people, no matter how important that is to all of us and how much we do want to be around them. Ultimately, like we're social creatures at the end of the day. But yeah, and then obviously that's something that I can speak on with only a very limited capacity. I feel like somebody like Jay is far more equipped to talk about stuff like that, but I hope that that's something that's going to be sort of considered in the future.
Well, Jay said she had a long list of things, and give me like your top 3 things that you're looking forward to, and maybe a smattering of things you'd like to see changed.
Oh, you mean me? I should go last. Let Raffy go.
You're queuing up your list. All right, Raffy, what are you looking forward to?
It's funny, like the irony of it all, because what I'm not looking forward to is exactly what ended up happening. So like we always talk about the legendary con flu, right? And I'm always quick to safety plan before we go to a PAX or some convention because I'm like, that's not gonna happen. Come to find out when I get tested for COVID-19, my doctor's like, well, the preliminary came out negative, but the antibodies test came out positive. And we're doing like a history check. And I'm like, yeah, the last time I was sick at home for a week, almost 2 weeks, was right after a PAX. So this is what we're not missing.
So
You know?
perhaps there's a small chance that as regular convention attendees, we've all developed superhuman abilities to, I would hope. It's not likely.
I mean, it's the start of a beautiful campaign. But I will say this, like what I am looking the most forward to is like bringing in the digital in better ways, right? So like it's one thing that we were able to last year have our NYC Gamers Pride event in such a beautiful building like the Samsung building in Midtown, right? And we had so many participants and it was a legendary experience for us, right? This year we had to think out the box and we were able to do it using Discord as a platform, right? And we had amazing, so oh my goodness, we had over 100 participants. Like we had virtual tables and like I was like, shut up and take what little bit of money I have left because it was just such amazing things, right? And it makes us think about how we want to do more of that, right? Like I'm looking forward to that even post-COVID, right? Like I don't have to just bring myself to the table at these events and out like platform. I want to bring the community with us, right? I want to be able to fundraise to have the sustainable technology needed to be able to say, we are hosting like all these things and we're bringing you with us, right? So like panels and workshops that are recorded and live streams so that these conversations don't stop in 45 minutes, right?
Sorry. Yeah, that's amazing. Jay, can you give me
That's
some?
why I wanted to go after you because I was like, no, I'm gonna let you say it because we were like the synergy. It was ridiculous. Yeah, the fact that people are just now discovering how many things can be accessible and don't have to necessarily be in person. All of the remote access, all of the digital passes to conventions that need to be expanded, and all of the things that need to be done in a way that everyone can actually enjoy them. We can continue this. Like people were saying, I don't know how we're going to go back to how it was. I'm like, we're not going back. Okay, we don't have to go back. We can keep going. We can keep taking this better and better and better. And we can absolutely start listening to people who aren't the same people we always get. I like that because everyone is kind of on an equal footing in terms of, I mean, as long as you have Wi-Fi and a camera, on equal footing in terms of providing content. We're starting to see more of the voices that we didn't hear before. And we're starting to see people providing content that we've never seen because we've only been focusing on people who could make it to the convention. Yeah. And I would love for a lot of the bigger conventions to take a look at what is out there right now and say, maybe next year we can mix it up a little bit and try something different instead of having the same guests all the time. Maybe we can compensate folks for labor that they're providing and the content that they're giving us for this convention. Because if you're providing the content, you're getting the audience, and that audience is paying for a ticket. That money should not just stop at whatever rich white guy is running the thing. It should go to everyone who's providing content for it. So that's what I want to see in 2021. People getting paid.
Masterclass over here too, Jay. Thank you. So as we're winding down, I want to touch base, and touch base with our theme of pride. And finding it in different circumstances, perhaps difficult circumstances this year. Certainly, I'm thinking of certainly Corona. We've seen a lot of, rioting and actions against police brutality and the undervaluing of particularly Black and Brown, Black and Brown lives of trans folks in this country. But I'm also wary that, these stories, I'm so glad when these stories make it outside of our, circles that are sort of keyed into these kinds of issues and they're getting spoken about in a larger sense. But I'm also wary of the fact that often LGBTQ lives and lived experiences of people of color are often spoken about in terms of tragedy. So my question is, what is bringing you all joy right now? I want to focus on the positive. And You know, hit me with that. Hit me with your joy. Jay?
So one thing that our community has always had that I have always loved is that when one of us makes it, we all make it. We are all happy for that person. So celebrating other people of color getting success in this terrible dark timeline is what keeps me going. Whenever I see somebody else winning, I'm gonna retweet, blog, whatever. I will pre-order that book, get that Kickstarter. I just want to help us get there. And I think that being able to find joy in other people succeeding and being able to support each other is the only thing that keeps me alive right now. Like that is it. Just I'm rooting for everybody Black and brown and queer and disabled.
I love it. Fyodor, what's making you joyful?
The way that people have come together on a very low socioeconomic level, right? Like we've all been really impacted. And I mean, marginalized communities have always been impacted by capitalism, usually negatively. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their sources of income. We're all stuck at home. We're in a very uncertain place. And what I'm seeing is, to the surprise of absolutely no one, the richest among us do not care. They're making money. Whereas people, now that this stuff is becoming part of the larger conversation that is not just restricted to the marginalized communities that have no choice but to engage in these conversations, I am constantly bolstered by seeing how people who have nothing to give are still giving. How they're using their platforms to raise money to give. Like I'm seeing so many artists just making it a part of their thing, not to just spread information or awareness or post the one piece of art or whatever, but to think of sustainable ways to give no matter what. And that kind of community, that is the kind of like scary commie future that coming from Russia, everyone's always, waving as the big scary stick. That's the kind of stuff that helps people not just survive, but thrive. And that counts for so much more than some billionaire giving like a scrap from their table. So that gives me faith in humanity, because that to me shows that at the end of the day, people, like I said, they're social creatures. They are looking out for each other. You can be the most reclusive person in the world, but at the end of the day, I think that shows that humanity ultimately cares and that we can do better. Because we have it in us, just intrinsically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's possible. We're doing it.
Yeah.
Raffy, the thing that's bringing you joy?
I want to use the word resilience. We are surviving an ongoing global pandemic, and who would have thought, right? Like, what does that mean? I love the trend on Twitter where people keep saying normalize this, normalize that, and I'm over here like, normalize the decolonization of what has been the normative for way too damn long. Like, normalize decolonizing, because we have done so much in so little time as a community, and I would love for us to keep that energy going. Like, I see all of these fundraisers going on where there are so many trans folks who are getting their GoFundMe's, reaching their goals and then some. And I see folks intentionally donating to individual giving. And I mean, AVP, the Anti-Violence Project, just got its largest donation at $1.7 million from Jack from Twitter. Girl, no shade. My job is secured for at least another year.
Good,
and right? And what Fyodor was saying, right? With the limited economic means and access that I have, I'm still giving more to my community than billionaires are at a percentage. And that's disgusting, but that also makes me feel proud. And that's what brings me joy, because we have this ability to uplift one another and to connect. I'm just going to say this last shameless plug, right? Which is that before COVID, my team at NYC Gamers had a whole strategic plan around fundraising, because while we are a legal nonprofit, we still need to fundraise for that 501c3 tax exempt status, right? And we want to fundraise for base building and for other services and amazing ideas that we have, right? We got an amazing response at our Pride event, and we still have our custom ink up for folks who want to be able to buy our limited edition swag, check us out at gamers.nyc. We have ways for you to reach out to us and let us know ways that you can support us. We're not saying no, we're all about it. And trust and believe that the more you uplift us as an org, the more other organizations are going to be uplifted in the process, because no one's getting left behind.
That is exactly it. And thank you for spreading the word. I want our other attendees here to give a moment to say, where can people find out more about you and your work? So Raffy, you're at nycgamers.com.
We got this really cute link. So it's gamers with a y.nyc. So it's gamers.nyc, right? So if you want to reach out to us like specifically, our email is youbelong@gamers.nyc. Go to our website. If you check out our events link, I think that it still has our information for the custom ink fundraiser. I think there's still like 4 days left on that. If you want to reach out to us directly, follow us on social media. All of our social media pages are on our website. The easiest way to reach me directly would be through Twitter at Raffi Regulus, or like any other social media page, honestly.
Wonderful. Jay, where can people find you and your work?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. So I am at ThatJayJustice, ThatJayJustice on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Discord, Twitch, all that fun stuff. If you want to contribute to LGBTHQ, we're at lgbthq.info, and also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everything else. And I'm working on a few things that I can't discuss right now, but if you follow me on social media, you will be the first to know after my mom.
Perfect. And Fyodor, where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I have a website, it's fyodorpavlov.com, and then I'm on all the social media under the same name. And I just wanted to plug one little thing. Right now I'm selling I don't know if folks know who Dandy Wellington is, but he's an incredible vintage style personality and musician. And he recently did an art challenge on Instagram for artists to create fashion illustrations centering Black people, because Black people are quite underrepresented frequently in the vintage community. And it's called Black Apparel Arts. So I created 4 pieces of art for it, and I'm currently selling the originals, and part of the proceeds are gonna go to Glitz, which is gay and lesbians living in a transgender society, which is an incredible organization that helps Black sex workers deal with the various crises that arise with being Black, being a sex worker, and living in our society.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear that you're keyed into that kind of stuff. I have to say just a shout out to the Brooklyn Liberation March that happened a couple of weeks ago in support of Black trans lives, with 15,000 attendees, and it was the best march. That was my pride. And it was benefiting Glitz and the Okra Project. And a bunch of other fabulous missions that I support. For myself, you can find Geeks Out and FlameCon on Twitter, Facebook, Insta. I think we're at Insta FlameCon and at Geeks Out on Instagram. Me personally, I'm a lurker on the internet, but you can find me on Twitter at Coco Deveau. That's COCODEVAUX. But you'll be hearing more from all these wonderful people and myself, because like we said, we've got a summer to dream big and make that happen. So I want to thank you all for being a part of our panel, and thanks everyone who was watching us on Facebook Live. At the very least, I hope we see you in December for AwesomeCon in DC under the Pride Alley banner.
Y'all better come through. I'm on 9 panels, y'all.
Amazing. Great. Well, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.